IEEE Bangalore section for facilitating this series. I think this series is very useful for everybody under this lockdown period to gain a little bit of cross fertilization sort of ideas from every different. So with that, I will just switch off my video and get into the topic and then get started. Right. All right. So this video is off. So you can listen to me, right? Audio is okay.
Yes, sir. It's all good. You can continue.
Okay, perfect. So this topic is a little bit unusual in some sense because this is not our generic topic. Is it audible?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir. We are able to hear you.
Okay, perfect. So this is about artificial pancreas development that you have taken up a project recently about 3-4 years back, and then we've got some interesting results on that. I would like to share as we go along. But before that, we'll give a little bit introduction or introductory material about this topic itself, so that it will be like the larger audience it can follow what's going on here. Before I get started, a little bit introduction to my institute. But it's not getting on actually. The slides are not changing. Slides should change, right?
Actually, yeah, slides should change. We are also only seeing the first slide now. Yeah, now we can see. We see the acknowledgement slide.
Before I start any seminar talk, it's a small acknowledgement to my institute. This is our institute doesn't need any introduction per se. Everybody knows about it. Still, this institute has given me space to do whatever I want to do. It's a great institute with 40 departments and centers, 4,000 mostly graduate students, 500 professors, 2,500 publications per year, number one in the country for research performance. So all of you students who are attending this talk, if at all you are going for graduate studies, masters and PhD within India, then probably our institute is the first one to look forward to. So this is more than 100 years old, but yet very young. In other words, this institute never sleeps. You can see students both night and day, 24/7. So that is how we work and we enjoy working. So with that, acknowledgement to my research funding and as you have listened a little bit, most of my work is around aerospace. So very naturally, I get a lot of association with DRDO, ISRO, Agency for Defense Development, things like that. But this particular talk is primarily funded by this new initiative of Government of India. It's called Imprint Program. So I have been kind of little fortunate to get two projects from this, both Imprint 1 and Imprint 2. And this particular topic is from Imprint 1, which talks about artificial pancreas. So this is all about my research interest actually. So we normally work both theory and applications of control. That is the heart actually. That is the backbone of all our activities. So we do work on nonlinear control, optimal control, adaptive control, state estimation, and predominantly about 70% aerospace engineering. But this particular talk happens to be in biomedical, and when Puneet talked to me, I thought this is more palatable, even though it is not directly COVID related and things like that. But a lot of people are right now interested in health issues, and this also gels well with the theme that talks about improving life quality and things like that. So I thought this is more appropriate in this platform. All right, so this is a pictorial representation of what all goes in my lab. We do work on missiles for various missiles, surface to surface, surface to air, air to surface, all sort of things, both guidance and control aspects. Then we do work on satellites. We did a lot of work on Chandrayaan missions, moon landing. And in fact, those of you are interested, you can probably request me that tomorrow morning there are two PhD defense on that topic itself. Again, through the internet meeting. We do work on UAVs. We do work on these hypersonic vehicles, advanced fighter aircrafts. Then recently, some laser weapon systems, things like that. But at the same time, we also look forward to other applications of control theory, which happens to be biomedical control, process control, things like that. So this particular talk is going to be dominantly on this aspect, which is customized automatic drug delivery in general, and in particular, how to kind of control the diabetes, essentially, blood glucose regulation part of it. Again, a few slides. I have kind of taken permission from this great professor. He is a professor in University of Delaware, and he recently gave a plenary in one of our conference in IIT Madras, and he has given me permission to take a few slides from his plenary. So he is a great researcher in this field, biological control system, and he teaches courses. He has published a lot of papers, things like that. So let's get started with his couple of slides before we come to my slides. So this is essentially what we talk about, is something about regulation. Those of you know control theory talks about regulating the operating point in biological terms, homeostasis. So it starts with a little bit of historical experiments. It goes all the way to 1775. And the professor there, whose name is Charles Blagden, and some research associates, they come together to do this experiment. They themselves become some subjects, and also beef steak, and they put it into some sort of oven. Okay? So all of them spent 45 minutes in that chamber, heated up to some 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 52.8, 53 degrees centigrade. And you can imagine how much is the heat actually. And in that heat, you have to sit there in the chamber for about 45 minutes. And unless you do it yourself, nobody will do. So the professor himself did that along with his research associate. At the same time, he took his dog inside and also looked at beef steak inside. And out of that experiment, the result is something like that. Obviously, the dog pointed. He wanted casting sort of thing. The men, all the men sweated, but all survived. Both the dog and men survived. However, the beef steak got cooked, obviously. The implication is whatever living organisms you have, they maintain some homeostasis. In this case, it was temperature homeostasis, basically. So that is regulating the temperature. No matter what, you adapt, basically. That's the whole idea of living organism. If something dead, which the beef steak is a dead, then obviously it could not maintain that, and hence it would cook and all that. So the homeostasis means conditions of stability. In other words, dynamic constancy. In other words, some operating value you have to maintain in certain phenomenon. Starting from this experiment, people got slowly convinced that probably something is going on there in the body, and they started more and more experiment, more and more interpretation, things like that. And then it turns out that the need for control in physiological system, the overall objective happens to be maintain physiological functions. That means regulate physiological variables within certain specifications. It doesn't have to be exactly following a reference command. In a lot of aerospace applications and other critical applications, we talk about exactly following steady state errors will be zero. Most of the biological system, they don't require that. All that you need to do is regulate within a band, basically. That will do the job perfectly. So challenges are also there. So probably most of the time it doesn't happen. So occasional insults will happen. That means some disturbance and other things can come. Persistent perturbations away from homeostatic conditions will happen, and then it will departure from the nominal limits. So that will lead to temporary illness. And if you don't cure that, then it goes to chronic illness, and then eventually, if chronic illness is also not get killed, the deviation is too much, and that results in death. So this entire phenomenon in the physiological control system has been categorized into 10 systems. The first is the so-called master regulators, the central nervous system and endocrine system. This happens to be the core system in the body for regulating many things. Then there are defenders, protectors, and supporters. There are something like immune system, then skin system, then the musculoskeletal system, things like that. And then there are utility activities, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, things like that. And eventually, it is the species propagator as well, or this reproductive system. So everything happens to be like something like an operating system homeostasis, kind of regulation. If something is operating within the zone, then you are fine. If something is not operating, then it's time for medication, time for doing some cure and things like that. So that can be done in a very systematic way through control system. Let's try to understand that. So if you see this, for example, extracellular fluid itself, we need so many things there: oxygen, carbon dioxide, sodium, potassium, calcium, everything is needed. And then everything has a normal value, and everything has a normal range also. But in short term, departures are also allowed way beyond that. So suppose, for example, you see glucose here. That's what predominantly are going to talk today. The required value is, the ideal value is about 85, they call mg per dl, a milligram per dl in the blood. But if you are within 75 to 99, you are very much perfect. Nothing to worry about at all. However, for very short time, you can go as low as 20 and as high as 150, and that also need not be worried. But beyond that, the things have to be worried about. And then if it remains in this departed value for a long time, that also needs to be worried about. Right. So if it happens to be a long time, it also needs to be worried about. Only short time is okay. All right. So now let's go to the engineering control system and biomedical application point of view. So, all right. So many diseases arise from control system component failure essentially, and it's not very surprising to see from engineering point of view. And essentially, what you can see that the control system, feedback control system, if it somehow kind of there is some component failure somewhere, then it results in some awkward feeling, disease, chronic illness, and then eventually death. So what you do now, then appropriate diagnosis, then treatment requires a lot of correct identification of the specific malfunctioning component. In other words, whatever problem you are having, that needs to be identified, and for that particular thing, you have to give some particular medicine for the deviation. So there are a lot of things like that, and for example, blood pressure. You can a lot of people are nowadays hypertension and all. They are advised to take 1 or 2 pills every day. Similarly, blood glucose. Again, there are pill-based therapy. And anesthesia is a very good control system sort of thing. It has got three components, and there are three different drugs combination that is given to them. So there are essentially hypnosis, lowering the blood pressure, and then painkiller. There are the three effects that you want, and there are three different drugs for that as well. And that is actually administered in a very real time with tight control sense basically. That's why you always need an anesthesiologist along with a surgery person. And all these things can be actually automated. And calcium homeostasis is another one. So all these things can be really automated if you really talk about a good control system algorithm point of view, which actually naturally the nature happens to do that internally basically. So if the internal control system fails, then externally you can do something so that system continues that way. All right, so this particular talk will specifically focus on blood glucose part of it and see what can be done in case of extreme failures. So now see, blood glucose regulation per se contains very nicely from control system point of view. You can see about this blood part of it. There are a lot of these red blood cell, white blood cell, lots of things, and in that there are a lot of nutrients, ingredients, and every sort of thing. In that, glucose happens to be one of the primary component. Glucose is necessary, of course, because it needs to be supplied. It is a kind of energy house. It has to be supplied to muscles for doing your activities. So that glucose is very important for it. The glucose level comes down, then obviously we go for loss of energy, then eventually fainting and may die also. That is hypoglycemia and all that. Eventually, that process is suppose it is high or low. Suppose you are very hungry and things like that. Then there is some sensor inside biological system inside the body. It gives a chemical signal. And suppose we eat a food somewhere, and then it essentially releases a lot of glucose to the system. And then that signal is getting into the pancreas system, and then pancreas get activated. It actually releases some insulin, and then it goes to the liver system. The liver system gets put insulin in there, and then mixes up, and then mixes with the blood and sends it to the system. Essentially, that's how it operates. And if you really feel hungry, and then suppose you don't want to take food for a long time on a whatever fasting day and things like that, the pancreas can also give the opposite hormone, which is called glucagon as well. That means it's almost like concentrated sugar syrup. You can think that way. So essentially, you get a lot of energy. That's why we feel hungry for a long time. Then we will feel hungry for a long time, and then suddenly no hungry is there. And hunger vanishes somewhere. So that is how it operates. So essentially, if the blood glucose level comes down below very much, then it releases glucagon, and if it comes very high, then it releases insulin part of it. And also remember at this point of time that we can synthesize. The biomedical people can actually synthesize both artificial insulin and glucagon. That's not a problem. However, glucagon is relatively unstable, but insulin is pretty much stable in normal conditions, normal atmospheric conditions. So this is what it happens inside the body. We'll come back to this and then try to understand what is artificial pancreas. So then what happens under normal situation it happens. However, if there is a partial failure in this case, in other words, suppose whatever amount of insulin we want to take, that much insulin is not getting secreted, then only partially it is getting secreted. So that's something called type 2 diabetes. There can be many reasons for that. First of all, there may be the insulin is getting created but not getting secreted. It is not getting created partially, or it is getting mixed, but the blood is not able to receive it properly. So there are many reasons for that. And depending on the various situation, they will give, the doctors give different type of medicines also. And one is before meal, one is the medicine that we normally take after meal, metformin and things like that. Those are to reduce the glucose production in the food, essentially in the liver. The glucose will be suppressed. But those people who take food, the medicines before food, the pancreas system will be told to kind of produce more insulin. So that is the kind of mechanism that operates there. So essentially, there can be partial failure, but partial failure can eventually lead to complete failure. That means there is no insulin situation at all. And that situation is called type 1 diabetes. Or it can also be some very unfortunate situation that some kids or some newborns may not have pancreas system operational from the birth itself. They are called cursed children. In other words, from the birth itself, or in very early in their life, they'll have pancreas system failure, complete failure. In those situations, there is no insulin at all, and so then they need to be given external insulin, and that become a major milestone in the research history for the pancreas. I mean, for the diabetes research part of it. And the person who actually synthesized the artificial insulin in 1921 got the Nobel Prize in the very next year. That was that much of a implication, essentially. It's a very good life-saving hormone, artificially synthesized, basically. So anyway, so coming back to this, this is diabetes can be represented in type 2 or type 1. It so happens that 90% of the diabetes happens to be type 2. So people like us above 40, slowly or one day or other will typically go towards that. And 90% of it's not that 90% of the population happens to be. No, it's not that way. If you take the total number of diabetic people as 100, then 90% of them happens to be type 2. That's the meaning. And then age of onset is typically 40 plus, kind of mild, you can say. And normally happens to obese people, and having the modern lifestyle actually helps towards that. Food is plentifully available. Carbohydrate rich food, a lot of sugar and sugar and rice and potato, all sort of things that leads to obesity, as well as lot of carbohydrate burden in the body. And then, of course, there is also genetic component. In other words, if our parents were either one or both are actually type 2 diabetic, then very likely we may get it also. So there are both ways of treating it, medicine as well as external insulin. Whereas in the other side, if we talk about type 1, only 10% happens, but it's a very severe case. And the age of onset can be extremely young. In other words, just 5-10 years kids can get it, or even from birth it can be there. Normal, they are typically very thin, normal or underweight many times. There is no genetic component per se, but they certainly require external insulin. This particular activity that you have taken talks about type 1 only. Type 2 we are not so much concerned about. Type 1, can we do something about it? It happens to be a severe case also. Alright, so now current practice, if you see, so it is essentially patient centric. Like if you go to like a doctor and the doctor takes a little bit kind of blood test, then they do either fasting PS and then PPBS, or they will get into this HbA1c, hemoglobin content and things like that. And then periodically they will change your dosage accordingly. And then most of the things it depends on the patient itself. The patient has to remember what time which drug has to be taken or how much quantity, and every day and night he has to remember and keep on doing that. That becomes a lot of liability from the patient point of view. And especially if we talk about young children and all, they are very likely to forget all that. This is not really very much effective in that sense. So essentially, it relies on patient's responsibility about diet, exercise, medication, as to some extent meditation as well. So there are some relationships so that if you do meditation, things may be a little more better experience. So these are highly patient-centric, but remember that medication is also predefined. That means every time that the patient is taking food, the measurement is not there, and accordingly the dosage is not getting adjusted. So most of the time, in control theory point of view, it happens largely in the open loop sense. There is no feedback directly there. So also remember, the insulin doses are based on a priori statistical data. That means the clinical trials are done for a large number of subjects, and based on that, there will be statistical mean variation, things like that, and around that value, the doses are designed. It is certainly not designed for particular person A or person B or person C. That's certainly not tailor-made. So essentially, the dosage somehow it operates because very fortunately the biological systems also have nice robustness properties. However, it doesn't work very well. That's the bottom line. So we cannot ensure close regulation of blood sugar, essentially for type 1 diabetes in some sort of open loop sense. Because remember, there is no partial secretion at all. When you have partial secretion in type 2 people, then this is from control theory point of view, you can talk about some damping factor essentially. We have some damping, the body naturally has some damping. However, in type 1 situation, there is no damping at all. That is why the problem becomes even more challenging. So this leads to the case of personalized medicine. So can we really talk about medicine doses based on person to person to person? And then almost like a feedback sensor, things like that. And now that the artificial intelligence has picked up quite a lot, now people talk about personalized medicine in a very big way. And in fact, Professor David Bell is very famous in the medicine science part of it. He's a doctor essentially. And he tell, I mean, the John Hopkins University School of Medicine is very famous in that sense. According to his opinion, all diseases have both genetic and environmental component, and often with interaction between both. So it is purely not genetic or not environmental. It's kind of combination of both. And every disease manifestation is personal. You just cannot talk about person A to person B to person C is very different. And that is actually very good in some sense. In other words, if you see even this COVID-19 problem today, it is not able to wipe out the entire population because everybody is different. Everybody's reaction is different. Some people are able to create antibodies, some people are not able to create antibodies. So that is why the virus is not able to defeat the entire population in that sense. So, but at the same time, it also creates difficulties in the sense whatever medicine we take, it's also not, it needs to be kind of personalized basically. In other words, two individuals with same diagnosis may respond differently to treatment and may experience the disease very differently as well. So different people for the same disease needs to be given different medicine and different doses, different timings. These are all comes under personal medicine. So disease and risk factors must be considered across the lifetime and of an individual. That means the way I kind of react when I'm young, I may not be able to react the same way when I'm old. So this is very natural in that sense. So change is difficult, but the medical profession should rigorously pursue precision medicine. That is what the kind of prescription basically, which is medical fraternity is actually gearing up towards this as well. They are very cooperative, provided we engineers can give a nice solutions to that. Feedback control perspective, let us come back to that. So we have got patient's physiological system. In control theory term, we can call that as a plant. And of course, there is some sort of output that can have disease indicator, some uncomfort, something has happened. So there is a lot of indicator for that. And that has been because there is a disrupting stimulus. In other words, noise or disturbance factor. That has created that. And this is nothing but our language, it's plant. So what we do now, actually, so we go to some diagnostic. Are you talking something? Hello? Hello?
You can continue.
Continue.
All right. So if you have any problem like that, then you can go to diagnostic test. So essentially, these are sensors in control theory language, and then test results come, sensor output comes, and obviously after sensor output, we have got some desired value or target and reference signal, and then based on the error between the two, the physician's recommendation comes. That is nothing but the control algorithm. You can talk about mostly fuzzy logic control. That means whatever the fuzzy rules and all doctors have been trained, based on that they prescribe. Most of the physicians' recommendation happens to be kind of fuzzy logic control in some sense. And then they will describe some diagnosis, prescription, treatment plan, and things like the diagnosis output. They will explain to you, and also they will give a prescription, treatment plan. These are outputs of the control algorithm. But that has to be actuated. That there should be actuator in the loop. So treatment plan or implementation is nothing but the actuator. So the patient himself has to actuate the plan, whatever plan is given to him. So that is how the entire things, if you look at it, this block diagram, if you look at it, is nothing but a control system essentially. So what is already happening in the doctor's domain, in the treatment domain, is nothing but a control system in this sense. So example, of course, diabetes. So in the context of diabetes, you can think about disrupting stimulus or something like genetic, environment, lifestyle. So these are the noise or disturbance. So disease indicator can be tiredness, excessive sweating, excessive, sometimes excessive urination and things like that. Those are indicators. And then you talk about test results. So go to blood test. It will come out well. Your blood test, fasting blood glucose is much more than 110 permissible limit, or HbA1c is much more than 7. Then what? So obviously your diagnosis diabetic person. So essentially the target value happens to come back to that below 99, and HbA1c should be below 6. That is what is the objective. So that is how it operates. And of course, the diagnosis prescription can be something like a metformin, either once a daily, or if it is 1,000, or if it is 500 twice a daily, something like that. And they will also tell you to control food. So low carbohydrate, lot of food will be restricted, no sweets anymore. And exercise kicks in, at least a morning evening walk, if not anything. Then talk the treatment action plan. First starts with medication. They start with those medicines. Then meal changes, of course, exercise. If that doesn't work, then it will go to insulin therapy also. That is what we'll get into that. So let's revisit this. So this is we just talked about few slides there. This is how it happens in a normal person when somebody is very healthy in the sense of blood glucose regulation context. In other words, a non-diabetic person. So it happens in a way. See, we got a food, or the food comes in. There is a sensor. It goes to the pancreas system. Pancreas releases the insulin, gets into the in this liver, and then eventually gets digested, and then happens in a regulatory sense. Now, this all happens in a natural sense. Now, what if there is a failure? We talked about the two types of failure. Type 1 is where nothing is there, and type 2 is partial failure. And here we are interested in complete failure, type 1 diabetic people. So, if the natural pancreas system does not work, then what is the idea that we make artificial pancreas system? This is what is there. This is not there, so this is not working. We'll forget about it for a second. Well, the liver is there. Liver will not go. But having said that, the pancreas system will go, and then liver only gets the food, but not no more insulin. So in that sense, what we can do, we can actually bring these guys in. We got now a synthetic sensor, or the sensor which is engineering sense we built in, and then this doesn't give biological signal anymore, but it can emit electrical signals, which can be read in any device you want to. There are some readers and things like that. And there is a controller which can be a computer, small computer, mobile computer. And a very good example is nothing but our cell phones these days. Cell phones have a very good processing capability nowadays. So that's a control algorithm which it can compute it. Then eventually it can give the command to something called insulin pump. And these pumps are also available in market nowadays. And this are very slow rate. It will give you whatever this algorithm tells it to give to the patient. It will give that much. So if you close the loop this way, and whatever comes out of the pump, it goes to the same blood system through the liver. So essentially, the liver is also bypassed in some sense because it is directly given to the blood system. It is not given to the liver anymore. It is not doesn't go to the food system. It directly mixes with the blood basically. So this one, blood can have nutrients and glucose and other things coming through the liver, but the insulin part goes directly to the blood through the insulin pump externally, basically. So this is the natural pancreas exon, and this is what it means by artificial pancreas. So what are the components needed? We need a sensor, we need some processing mobile processing unit, and then we need a actuator, which is nothing but insulin. These are the three main ingredients. Of course, they need to talk to each other also. They need to talk to each other also, and of course, they are throughout the body. We cannot put wires and all that, so they need to be wireless communication. So this is what the necessity. We'll talk about that as we go along. And sometimes this processing unit and this actuator unit are combined. In other words, inside the insulin pump itself, there will be a processor which is sufficiently capable. And memory is also cheap these days. So this memory and processor capability, if it is good inside the pump itself, then we don't need a national computing device. So directly the sensor can directly talk to the pump, and that is what is called fifth generation artificial pancreas. That is what very recently, in fact, January, the University of Virginia team they've come up with this, and that has been kind of approved by FDA as well. So they are going into market very soon. But before that, Medtronic has also come up with that, using their own sensor and own pump as well. story. So if you see the technology timeline, so this is not opened overnight and all that. There is a long history for that. And in fact, this is what I told. 1920, this great scientist who actually discovered the insulin, and the very next year he got the Nobel Prize, as I told. That was a mild breakthrough discovery, and suddenly the lifespan of the people, life expectancy was increased by 20 years actually for diabetic people. Then go fast forward to 1960. Then this is where this insulin pump started coming as a kind of a bagpipe and things like that. This little bit heavy machinery, and there's all over wires are all over the place. But having said that, this was at that point of time considered as a status symbol. In fact, our own one Indian used to have it proudly, and he is nothing none other than our Tamil movie actor MGR, M.G. Ramchandran. He used to have that. And so, 1960s to 70s, you got different ways of mobile units and all that. You can also have the kind of sensors, actuators, all that there. But all these are kind of history. Now, come directly towards this 2000 actually. That is where miniaturization started coming, and you suddenly have a lot of these small devices which are pretty accurately started coming. That is where there is a lot of jump happened after that, around just about 20 years back. And these couple of slides I have taken from Dr. Anand Basu, who is actually in university. What it tells you is 2008, there was a big jump where it something like a simulator came, which is called University of Virginia and Padova University come together. They come up with a nice simulator for type 1 diabetic people, using which a lot of computational research kicked in, basically. So, because otherwise, doing this kind of research is a lot of time consuming, and then effort consuming, money is also required in a big way like that. But if you have a simulator which actually mimics the behavior in a very close sense, then a lot of people from computational point of view, analysis point of view, mathematics point of view, control theory point of view, they can come in and do a lot of computational research, conceptual verification research and all that. Then we fast forward a little bit here, then suddenly there are a lot of progress here, and this is up to 2015. Now we have got a lot more progress with the last 5 years as well. So things are done global actually. Now no more restricted to only US. Now people talk about this great research goes on in a lot of Western countries. There is a good group in Italy. There is a good group in Switzerland. There is a lot of good, nice activity in UK, and of course US. There is some activity in Australia, some activity in South Korea, something in Singapore as well. So this is that, and then so essentially, what is this artificial pancreas in the context of all these developments? If you see that way. Now go back to this, and you can directly talk about artificial pancreas. Just you need a sensor and an actuator, and there is a control algorithm that is embedded into the pump, and these two guys keep on talking to each other every 5 minutes. That's what it is. And if you, it gives the correct, 5 minutes is kind of very reasonable biomedical. It's kind of real time in biomedical system. If you take a food and food gets digested in about 2-3 hours, so 3 hours will have every 5 minutes means you'll have 36 samples and all that kind of thing. So that is that's every 5 minutes it gives you data. In fact, every 1 minute it is capable of collecting a data, but every 5 minutes is kind of filters out some data and gives out the data in a reliable sense. And then this data is transmitted here in a wireless sense, and then it computes the control algorithm. And finally, there is the insulin reservoir inside, and there is a actuation. The small amount of insulin will come out and go inside the skin. Okay. So both this sensor as well as this actuation happens something called subcutaneous, essentially below the skin. You cannot directly put it into the blood vein, IV and things like that, because that is painful, and that is also a chance of infection, and a lot of problems are there. So both of these happen to be subcutaneous level, but that brings in the additional difficulty of time delay. So whatever happens in the bloodstream doesn't reflect immediately below the skin. So that both sensing as well as actuation will have some time delay there. So that has to be accounted for in the control algorithm as well. So this is direct approach. You don't need any other devices. You just need a sensor and just need a insulin pump. However, there is an indirect approach. What happens here is most of the time, because of safety issues and all, these pumps will not be allowed to communicate with external devices. So they are very restricted and all that, and nobody will allow us to do kind of control system embedding into that and then try it to the patient. So there are a lot of security issues and liability issues and things like that. And of course, in India, there is a company which does this sensor production, and there is no company which does this insulin pump production either. So we just cannot collaborate with any company directly either, basically. So that's another restriction that came along with us. Anyway, indirect approach is something like this. You start with a sensor and then transmit the data to another device, maybe a reader or whatever. That transmit to some sort of a cell phone, and then that is transmitted to a pump, and finally pumps gives it. So this is the kind of indirect approach that we are following in our lab also. Right. So there are so many activities globally that essentially this there is a IEEE control system magazine. IEEE control system is a society in IEEE. It actually gives this magazine every 3 months. So in February 2017, they came up with this magazine, which is special issue devoted to artificial pancreas system only. A lot of discussions happens there, and if you're interested, I strongly suggest that you at least have a glimpse of this particular issue of this control system magazine. All right. So with that motivation in mind, we'll come back and quickly see what all we have done in our group. So this is our research that we started 3 years back. Artificial pancreas development for type 1 diabetic patients in India. So this focus is now in particularly our Indian people. This is the team. Along with me, the two colleagues. One is Manish Arora, who is responsible for a pump development. And you have seen Professor Hari a couple of weeks back. He is a communication expert. He is talking about helping us in the communication part of it. And then there is a team from MSR, Ramaya Medical College. Doctors, there are all endocrinology department, diabetic doctors essentially. They are the one who suggest us from medical point of view or what should be done, what is possible, what the patients want, and also do this clinical trials that we are interested in. So we are interested in two phases. First phase is you have to draw blood samples and then kind of analyze the blood insulin, blood glucose repeatedly, and then kind of fit the system identification data. That's phase one part of it. And phase the last segment, when you are done with all this, then they are also supposed to take it to a real patient and test it. Okay. So in both sense, they are helping us basically. That is where the team is helping up. The team is acting from 2017 onwards. The project is supposed to be ending. Theoretically, it has ended already, but we have got a lot of assurance that it is going to be extended for a year. So I have included that 1 year as well. So formally, the project will be kind of ending in the March and next year. We have got some time to close up ourselves. Whatever there are a lot of activities going on right now, I'll talk about it. So essentially, the key component of artificial pancreas, so we got sensor, and this sensor is something that we are not developing. We are just trying to use it as off-the-shelf bought-out component sort of thing. And this is not really very expensive. It's about 2,000-3,000. But the problem is it is disposable also. Every 2 weeks, the patient is supposed to kind of put a new sensor on that. Beyond that, it doesn't work. Then there is a control computation or control algorithm part of it, which is system identification, the basic control algorithm, state estimation, adaptation. All these are getting done in my lab. And then there is control algorithm implementation also. So we have to really put it into the pump or the phone. Either way. That also happens in our lab. And there is the insulin pump activity that Dr. Arora takes care of that. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then there are communication solutions. We have to talk about the sensor has to talk to phone. It doesn't talk directly because the sensor gives in a NFC signal, whereas the phone can receive only Bluetooth. So there is something which can convert to one signal to other, and that is what we have come up with, something called limiter device. And unfortunately, the phone also cannot talk to the phone directly. There is a communication problem for that as well. In other words, this pump takes typically the commercially available pumps take in RF. The pump So this is what is happening there. So communication. So these are all the components that is getting done. We are buying the sensors. We are also not, of course, not developing a phone. We are just buying that. The pump is getting developed in IISc. This part is actually brought. Okay, this is something called relay link, but this is something that is getting developed in IISc. It's already done. So there are two ways again. One is if our pump is ready, then we can directly take the signal, pass it through a limiter, and directly go to the pump. That's one approach. The other one is go through the phone and then whatever compute and then give it to the pump. So that is indirect approach. Both the things are getting done here. The first thing, the control algorithm point of view, first you have to do system ID part of it, and then you talk about control algorithm part of it. This is where we did some clinical trials first, And we started with some a little bit bold in the beginning. We started with the patients directly. Of course, the test results were not satisfactory. We did it repeatedly for a couple of patients and then sent the blood samples to 3 different test diagnostic centers and all that. But eventually, those are not really successful. The reasons for that, I'll not elaborate on that. And then we went to the healthy subjects, that healthy people, and then we got success. That some story I'll avoid here. And after that success, we went back to this type 1 diabetes people and then got some success. That is the story that almost took about a year to kind of stabilize this. So eventually, what the result from that for the healthy patient turns out to be very, very interesting. In other words, there was a lot of speculation in the literature that South Asian people, especially Indian population, are very different from Caucasian population. This is this white people basically. So this turns out to be the case. It turns out that in our case, our Indian people, they've got lower insulin sensitivity. In other words, for digesting the same amount of food, we'll talk about taking more insulin requirement essentially. So it's not surprising that many Indians are susceptible to diabetic early. So this is what our data showed, and this is out of rigorous testing and parameter fitting and things like that. This is rigorously done, and this was awarded the first prize in this conference as well. So medical fraternity were very happy to see that. What did we do then? After that, we went to the type 1 diabetic people and tried to do the parameter estimation for the patients really. And this, if you see the system, it talks about 3 components essentially. One is glucose absorption model, which is kind of a meal model, loosely talking. Then you have got a glucose regulatory model, glucoregulatory model, what we call the basic fundamental called inside bloodstream what happens. And then there is this insulin absorption model, which is actually talked about if you give the insulin through a subcutaneous way, then how does it go into the blood? The insulin is not really in a ready to use form and all that. There are stability issues. So they are typically done in something like a stable form, which is something called hexameric form. So that one, once you get into the subcutaneous, it mixes with the subcutaneous fluid and it kind of disintegrates into something called monomeric form. And that monomeric form is very small particles and all. So essentially, you can think about kind of a pizza or something. That's what I normally think about. The pizza has 6 slices. The hexameric has 6 of those slices joined together, so it doesn't go through the pores of the muscle and all that. However, once it disintegrates, you can take 6 slices individually, and that gets into the blood, and then mixes with the regulatory system basically. So obviously, that doesn't happen instantaneously. There are time delays for that. And similarly, if you take the glucose absorption through the oral way, not through the IV way, then of course it goes to the liver and then gets into the blood system. So obviously, there is a time delay also. All these things are accounted for basically in the model. So I'll not spend time on that, but this is the typical, very basic, minimal equation that you have to deal with here. And anything lesser than that means you are not really realistic. That's the message here. So you got 3 plus 2, 5 plus 3. So 8th order system is the very minimum thing. If you really talk about a very high fidelity system, it goes all the way to some 22 states and all that. So that is not possible to implement a control system based on that. So we work on something called minimal model, and augmented minimal model is because there is a food digestion system and there is a insulin absorption model from the skin basically. So that is what it is getting into the skin. So this is a little bit too much. So we talked about, we just decouple this and then directly talk about glucoregulatory model. So we did something called IVGTT, called intravenous glucose tolerance test. And directly the glucose is given to the blood, and directly from the IV itself you take the blood sample and try to do some parameters. So in this thing, they are largely concentrating on only this component, not these two segmented. There we got very interesting thing. In fact, details are there. I'll just leave it. Initially, you give some food and then inject an insulin a little bit later. So this is kind of an impulse input, impulse in the meal input, impulse in the insulin also basically. So once you do that, impulse inputs are very good for parameter identification. They inject a lot of disturbance momentarily basically. So they're jerking the system essentially. So you get like that. And these are the parameters that you see: P1, P2, P3, and then things like that. Those are the things that you want to estimate. And this was a rigorous exercise. We went ahead and tried to do something. It did not work well. In other words, this particular coefficient that you see here, we have to inject this function ourselves, and then it started working well. All that there. And parameter estimation also, you don't do it in a single shot sort of thing. There are a lot of this pre-processing. You get filters, then you can also have two different parameter estimation logics, one nonlinear least square as well as maximum likelihood. Then you do all sort of validation and see that both of them are actually giving the same parameter. So the difference between them is nearly zero. Then only you get a lot of confidence that what you're doing is good. This exercise was done, and then eventually we got very nice fittings. As you can see that the one is the estimated glucose, the other one is essentially the lab test data. And after this fitting, we are more or less happy that okay, we got it, and then went to the full model, which will also have all the two additional components as well. So the bottom line is once you augment this using this and that, your parameter set is very large. So now you've got a lot of parameters to kind of talk about. So that has to be done in a precise kind of a little bit careful sense. And also remember all these freedom variables. For example, this something called basal value of glucose and basal value of insulin. Essentially the steady state values. So those values cannot have too much departure from the hungry time. In other words, before taking food, whatever you had, it is supposed to be similar value after the long time of food as well. So you get to give some bounds and all that for that while estimating the optimization routine basically. You can do that, and then these are the samples. So you can select a lot of sampling. You can see you can start collecting blood samples at -5, 0, 4, 8, 12, 16. And if you see that this entire protocol has to be approved by ethical committee, that was done, and this was very much all the subjects are essentially those are type 1 diabetic patients of the doctors. So they were convinced about the utility of that, and they get admitted one day before. Next day morning the test starts and all that, etc. So it stays for about 3-4 hours, the entire duration of the test. And various times you can keep on taking out a little bit of blood, and don't get kind of afraid of that so many sampling. But even if you kind of mix up all the things, the total amount of blood taken will be roughly about 150 ml. So which is, if you go for blood donation, it will be 350 ml normally. And this is not too many pricks either. So if you do too many pricks, nobody will come to you. So we do one prick like your saline injection sort of thing, and from that we keep on supplementing. That is that way. All right. So now this is what we got after doing all that, and then going through the same parameter identification, whatever we just talked about. To go through all that. By now we have got a lot of confidence that only least squares can be used. All other things need not be used. You can only use this Savitsky-Golay kind of pre-filter, pre-processing, and you can come up with this nonlinear least square that will do the job. And we don't have to send the sample to 3 different diagnostic centers anymore, because those 3 were not giving us additional input either. Initially, we started sending samples to Bombay also. 2 labs, one in MS Ramaiah itself, the other one is RB Center in Bangalore, the other one is RB Center in Mumbai. So essentially, there are 3 things are needed, because 2 is not really a good one. If his data is not matching, then you don't know which one is correct, which one is wrong. At least 3 is needed for voting sense and all that. So that for that psychology we started, but eventually we boiled down. There is nothing much we are gaining, so we can stick to Ramaiah itself. That is what is done. You can see the parameter estimation repeatedly done. It's not just one time. You can revisit this exercise many times and then see what is going on there. So this is what is the latest data, the latest thing that is getting into our thing. So you can see that both of things are pretty well matching for almost all patients. You can see this numbers, subject number 3, 4. And it should not match only the glucose part, it should also match the insulin part, which is the harder part. So this is what both the things have to match together always. This is patient number 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. We've got 20-30 patients like that. Now with all this parameter estimation, or we have got some confidence in the parameter values, what next actually? So next is obviously closed loop control algorithm. So we got this model that we started this model, and now we use this model or manipulate this model to come up with this external control input, which is external into the insulin component here. And remember, there is a delay factor here, and that delay with the consultation of doctors has been taken as from 5 to 10 minutes essentially. In other words, if you put the insulin now, it will get into the blood about 5 to 10 minutes later. So that has to be accounted for as well. So we go back to that, and then now we talk about how can you do some sort of a good control design. Now, if you talk about control design, the very first thing comes to mind is PID control, and that is what is very successful in the industry, and then many people happen to use it. Even artificial pancreas have been proposed using PID control. But remember, PID control or any control of that form, including this dynamic inversion or feedback linearization, all that, which actually results in some sort of a closed form solution of the control exome, essentially is non-predictive. In other words, it is only reactive. Whatever has happened. Whatever sensor is picked up. Based on that only you have to compute instantaneously. And it doesn't really work well, because what happens, your bad or good effect actually comes later. And that is where you have to go to something very powerful of control theory. It's called optimal control theory. And a very specific branch happens to be something called model predictive control. And this particular philosophy has been very successfully used in this particular problem, artificial pancreas, from a group from Harvard University. They collaborate with Virginia Tech University. So with those things in mind, and our lab also works on optimal control heavily. In fact, we do work on real-time optimal control for aerospace problems as well. So there we started, okay, why can't we use MPC to start with? So that's what we did that. And what is MPC essentially? It's a kind of an online optimization. You've got a system dynamics, you've got some objectives, you've got some constraints. So account for all that and come up with some sort of a optimization problem and solve that optimization problem online. In other words, if you've got a set point here and your predict future trajectory where it is going, and this deviation of this set point from the actual value, whatever predicted value, has to be minimum. So you come up with an integral cost function subjected to system dynamics and then some sort of a inequality constant bounds and all that. So what is the outcome? What you will get is you will get a entire control history solution for whatever future time you are looking into. In this particular problem, we are talking about 2 hours look ahead time basically. So it talk like that. And then what you do is you just implement one time step and then repeat the process again and again. So that's a sliding mode sort of thing basically. Essentially, this look ahead doesn't stop anywhere. It just kind of slides away by 1 delta t. You compute the entire control history, but you implement 1 delta t and then account for whatever initial condition change might have happened because of extra food, extra exercise, whatever it is, and then repeat this exercise again. So that is the philosophy there. It's very powerful because it can handle constraints very easily, and then it talk about optimization also, the minimum control and things like that. But at the same time, it requires lot more processing capability. Now we are talking about doing online optimization. So this is still okay because see this delta t, or the time of execution, sampling time is actually 5 minutes. 5 minutes in our processors that are available, even in cell phone, is actually a luxury. So within a few minutes, if time availability is there, then we can do miracles there. So that is what it is. Typically, in aerospace problems, we get of the order of milliseconds, right? 30, 40, 50 milliseconds. Here we talk about minutes altogether. So that's the beauty. So this is again the math formulation. I'll not get into too much of detail, but you actually have to have a control, which is cost function, which need to minimize, which makes sense, which is essentially this cost function in this particular problem. You get a reference value for glucose, you got a reference value for insulin, you got reference value for insulin input also. That is everything after the food gets digested, this actual glucose should come back to these values. So that is what has happened there. So we started constructing this cost function, and these bound values are put in some sort of a physically meaningful sense. And this is this normal Euler integration, Euler discretization for this differential equation integration. You put it all that and then try to get some solutions. So this is your prediction horizon about, sorry, I told 2 hours. It's really not 2 hours, 3 hours rather. The prediction horizon is 180 minutes. And sample time of prediction is about 1 minute. That means every 1 minute you can keep on predicting. But control update is actually 5 minutes. And assumption in this particular exercise, you took only carbohydrate meal amount something like very known, 20 grams. And we also told that, okay, 20 minutes before the meal, the insulin action has to start. That's part of the algorithm, because if you go to the subcutaneous modeling and you see, if you just give a little bit step input, the real output comes out after 20 minutes essentially. So we can, if you know that information, you can put that in the algorithm as well. That's what we did, and this you can see. But before that, there is also another concern of how do you actually implement in the cell phone. So that is where we have to dig out something, and then it turns out there is a Casady toolbox, and that Casady is essentially kind of a C toolbox, and you can formulate MPC using that toolbox. There are functions available, and that Casady toolbox essentially integrates well with MATLAB as well as Python both. So you can very quickly check your algorithm using MATLAB, but eventually you have to go into migrate whatever works here can go to my Python environment, and that is the one which will go to Android phone essentially. So these are some of the reasons. So we got after 20 minutes there is a meal injection there, and the insulin actually starts from zero, but food comes 20 minutes later. So there initially there is a glucose drop, and once the food comes, the glucose starts raising, but at the same time the insulin has come into picture also. Remember, every 5 minutes there is a step change basically, and that is eventually able to control the blood glucose in a very nice way. This is our remember, this is our domain. What we wanted to control it within this 80 to 210. That is what is our objective. Remember, anything that goes 210 should come below 210 very quickly also. In other words, these are only small time departure actually. So we have to do something called time in range and all that. That's getting done once you get this 24-hour cycle. All right. So this is where it is. So we can now we talk about we can very well see that 20 minutes later the food is given and it is again working for a different case. So this is what it is, and then once you do that, the nominal case. This is for subject 5. What happened there, and this is for subject 6, another patient, and this is for subject 7. So every case it happens to be within the limit actually. Right, and if it goes there to the sum of the bound, it is not allowed to go beyond that. It just stays there and then comes out. That kind of things are. And then we tested out for varying meal announcements. Suppose somebody tells 20 minutes, but actually 20 minutes is not the one you can start eating the food. Suppose the food is tasty, you cannot wait for 20 minutes. You start eating a little bit early. The smell is very attractive probably. Or somehow you forget 20 minutes and then come to a little bit later, maybe 5 minutes later. So we give this some sort of a unknown, kind of a disturbance or some sort of a known value, let's say, whatever. So we vary this thing for 15 minutes or 25 minutes, and then even then it's able to kind of maintain the regulation in way it's not going to getting out of the bounds essentially. And it is happening. The peak value is supposed to happen around 90 minutes, by the way, 80 minutes to 90 minutes. So 1.5 hours, you get a peak. That is also happening here. If you see that, probably if you see 20 minutes, 20, 80, so probably about an hour, you get a peak basically. It's actually very compatible to what should happen in normal cases. And then we do this varying initial conditions. We can start with different initial conditions. What happens there? And again, it is successful for subject 1, subject 5, things like that. But so this is very encouraging. These are pretty recent results, by the way. We have not debated in our internal meetings as well. It will come up very soon. But having said that, the control algorithm is not about this. The entire control algorithm is very safety critical because we are now talking about controlling automatically for a patient. And the very dangerous part is if your insulin input really goes higher than necessary, then your blood glucose will drop down very well, very high. Drop down very fast. And if it goes below 50, below 40, below 30, they are called hypoglycemic cases, and they are very serious cases. If it stays there in a very low level, then the patients can die also. And there are cases for that as well. So we have to be very sensitive about it. And then the entire algorithm is not just the MPC, but we now talk about various other issues as well. So we talk about, well, your sensor gives only glucose monitoring. That means only you get glucose output every 5 minutes. But your control algorithm is based on 8 states. So you have to talk about state estimation to get through extended thermal filter, things like that. We started some activity along that. And also, nobody has kind of enhanced the meal and exercise. So that also has to be detected and estimated. Then you talk about model adaptation, learning, artificial intelligence, like that. There are these pump cutoff algorithms. So all these things has to be there in a very good artificial pancreas algorithm. Basically. That is what. Okay, so this is all about control thing. And very quickly, about 5 minutes I'll take to complete. 5-10 minutes I'll take. Just allow me for that. For other things, basically. So this has to be implemented in the cell phone eventually. So if we talk about AP system with existing pump and cell phone, this is the second part of it. And then this indirect approach. So essentially, you got a sensor and then got a limiter. So this. So this is well, nothing should. That's okay. All right. So this is a sensor. It will give you the sensor. The data will come in NFC signal essentially. So you have to put this limiter very close to that. In fact, the sensor will go inside that, so that the data is captured from there. And then there is a signal converter. So it will convert from NFC signal to Bluetooth. Bluetooth will come to Android phone, and then it will also compute and give out a signal in Bluetooth. But that Bluetooth, there is the relay link device, which will again convert it to RF signal, and that will go to the pump and eventually it will. And this entire communication path has been tested already. So we are getting the communication right through the sensor to the pump. That's already demonstrated. There are of course issues of data disconnection, then reconnection, auto connection, safety, all that. That is getting into the, we are sorting on issue whether. Then so this is what you talk about CGMS2 phone. So you got a sensor to NFC to Bluetooth to essentially a cell phone app actually. We talk about a app development, that app is also developed. And then from the cell phone, it goes to the Bluetooth and also talks to the relay link and finally goes to the phone. So all these things has been done. So now app has several features. So app you can do this refresh button. You can see some devices there. You can also do security. So you can also fingerprinting and all that. You can do password also. You can do, and you can do this app drawer. You can also have many other things that can get into that. And there are also open loop mode you can operate. That means you can give what is Basel Boulos regime and it will operate that way. And you can also do many other things as well. You can read the pump parameters as well. This is a nice activity was done in some sort of a summer training or some internship by a BTech student from Ramya Engineering College essentially. But that is getting further developed now. So now you can do this lost connection. What will happen? How do you come back between? I mean, whenever you go away and come back, will it automatically connected or not? Sorted out. And this low glucose level warnings will happen. You get many other things that I not get into that actually. So this is a kind of development history, and this getting further developed for integrating this app into the doctor's app as well to the cloud system. That we have a new activity have started. All these things that is getting into the app of the phone of the patient, it should also be available in the doctor side through the cloud actually. That is a new activity that will be happening for about 6 months from now today. That's from our guest basically. Finally, there is also an insulin pump development, which our colleague Dr. Arora has taken. We started a long journey. We started with task verification, conceptual design, embodiment design, prototyping, and testing. That is what currently going on. And then development of refined prototype also getting on. So we started with some CAD models, and then it's a very good mechatronic system. The mechanical part, gearbox, lead screw, all sort of things. There are electronics parts as well, display systems, then kind of functional units and all that. All these things has been done, and there are extensive testings done. There are various ways of doing that. You can got oscilloscope testing, you got camera testing, you got integration, many activities over 2-3 years altogether. You got patent filing as well. So this is kind of some snapshots what is going on there in that lab in our colleagues Manish lab. This is actually come up with a product which is operating right now basically. Getting through some validation tests, some comparison tests as well. This is the final comparison with that. Suppose this is your command. This is accumulated command over time, and this is what the commercially available pump is doing, Medtronic pump. Whereas this is the one which is our pump is doing. So you can see that slowly there is a bias thing, which is really not good. So if you cannot talk about the once the pump operates for a long time, it should not kind of deviate from the reference signal. And for that also, we've come up with a biasing signal input and all that based on the error characterization. It works very well. In fact, it turns out that somehow the performance in our initial estimation, it turns out to be performance-wise better than the Medtronic pump. It's actually very nice to see that. The only problem is, of course, the size is very big, so probably that miniaturization and all that has to happen. And also there are issues of safety, and then there are issues of medical trial and all that, which is getting started basically. So in conclusion, this is all that I wanted to say. About conclusion part, we got extensive system identification and very well done. In fact, an Indian population is different from Caucasian population. That was the speculation, but now it is confirmed. And then control algorithm, we have got basic MPC, which is a very core component that itself is done. But in progress is state estimation, meal exercise estimation, model adaptation, many other issues that we talk about, implementation part, things like that. App development, basic functionalities are already done. There are some connectivity issues. There are control algorithm. You have to embed that inside the app. That is not done. So these two activities are going to be sorted out pretty soon. And there are the insulin pump. Of course, we have developed a functional pump, and in progress is safety issues, security issues, clinical trials, all that. So in general, the progress has been very good, and the project is actually progressing well also. In fact, about 6 to 8 months, we are supposed to get a lot more better things. There's a very passionate team now, which is sorting out all these issues in a very decent. So this is all that I want to tell. But before that, we actually had a Tech Expo in Imprint One project in last August. All these 142 projects that were supported from Imprint program were invited for a Tech Expo there. And based on the project evaluation, you can see the HRD minister looking closely to our system and all that. And in fact, it turns out that we are given a kind of priority booth there, along with Another 15. So in other words, our project was declared is one of the best 15 out of 140. It's a very nice thing to see that, and with that person, we continue the journey. Hopefully, next year this time we'll have a good, decent artificial pancreas, which will actually go for clinical trial as well. Thank you. That's all. This is our team, and in fact, this is some of the people are not there anymore. In other words, the students keep on moving through their careers and all that. But the recent addition has been of Abhishek, which is doing a PhD student in cyber physical systems. Is doing the control part of it in a very good way. And Deepya, which is actually a project staff, who is looking into the app development for the things and integrating into the web-based solutions or the cloud-based solution to the doctor's computer and all that. Doctor's phone, essentially. This is our good team. I'm very happy to lead this team or kind of gel well with this team. We had a lot of fun activities, a lot of fun, a lot of monthly meeting, a lot of brainstorming. Many times it is actually pleasant. And we actually learned a lot by collaborating with the doctors team. It's a very nice thing to have doctors and engineers collaboration. In fact, coming from aerospace background, it's actually a very new journey for me altogether. But it's very rewarding, and hopefully it will come as a kind of a human benefit to whatever knowledge we have. That's all. Thank you from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Padi. This was a very insightful session on the importance of pancreas on our good health, and also sharing insights on your research on artificial pancreas. So we do have some questions in the chat window. Probably, like, if you can spend some time, I can read it out for them, and you can answer them one by one. Yeah, the first question would be, like, of late there are some talk that type 2 diabetes is reversible. What is your opinion on that? Is it possible?
Early stage, it is reversible. Literature says, and doctors agree also. So if you have something called pre-diabetic, before you are declared as diabetic, in fact, very interestingly, right now I am actually in pre-diabetic condition. Okay, so pre-diabetic stage is something that doctors do tell that, okay, with meditation, medication and exercise and all that, essentially if you can regulate your food well, and if you are little kind of overweight, you can reduce your weight a little bit, and then kind of limit your food intake, become very disciplined in that, do some good amount of exercise, then probably over a year or something you can reverse it. And that our Ayurvedic studies also have seen that and all that. In fact, in pre-diabetic stage it is possible, but once you go to diabetic and you are not able to control well, probably reversing that is not possible. So some of us who are in the pre-diabetic stage may be willing to try that and all that kind.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, using wireless technology brings in EMI and EMC issues, etc. As the sensor is closely to the actuator, can we not use some thin conductive connectivity? Can the mobile be removed from the system and improve the processing capacity of the local controller?
They are talking wired solution, not the wireless solution, right?
Correct.
In fact,
Yeah.
see, there are a lot of what patients want or not, that has to be accounted for. Remember, this is a kind of a wearable device, right? Everywhere this device is supposed to operate 24/7, and then people should not be kind of entangled with wires all over the place. Actually, nobody wants that way, and it is ergonomically not good. People don't want to even show that they are on artificial pancreas system. Nobody wants to even display a pump outside, basically. These are many issues like that. We have actually had a lot of long discussion with doctor's team. And in fact, there are a lot of sensitivity issues, where to put the pump, where to put the sensor and all that. Nobody wants to kind of display. And of course, when you have a wide solution, it actually brings in a lot of additional difficulty. And so, like, while sleeping also, you have to have that. While taking bath, you have to have that. I mean, it's not possible. Globally, it has been kind of discovered already. So only wireless is the only solution, and that way to proceed further by sorting out the issues rather than avoiding the issues. It is possible.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. The insulin, the new ones are designer insulin, which has immediate action and lost time effect. What sort of insulins, traditional or designer insulin, which has been used in the algorithm development and trials? With the granular control, can we do away with the costly designer insulin and use the traditional insulin? And associated question is, how is artificial insulin is prepared?
Well, the second question, answer to the second question, probably I'd like to pass on to our doctor team or some biomedical team, or see the biology department things and all that. I'm not very, I'm not aware of that process altogether in a good way. So that is there. But having said that, what's the first question?
The difference between traditional
The
and
first
the
question.
designer. Yeah, the difference between the traditional and the designer
Okay,
insulin.
got it. So there are two types of insulin in the See, I'm basically an engineer, so I'll talk in engineering language. Not getting the biology is part of it, but essentially what we call long-acting insulin and degener is essentially degener is short-acting insulin in some sense. Okay, is what we realize. What we call it. Short-acting insulin is once it flows to the blood, it immediately starts acting. Now, if you take a insulin short, basically, in other words, multiple injections and all that, there are a mixture of short-acting and long-acting. That is probably the degener insulin, all that somebody talks about. So what happens? Some things gets diagnosed, get into the bloodstream quickly. Little bit later, some other component will come. Little bit later, something else will come like that. So that typically is kind of a combination of various percentage of long-acting and short-acting. So that is designer probably. So, but essentially in the artificial pancreas system, we are actually using all short-acting only. So the entire pump reservoir is always having short-acting alone. Because once you inject it into the body, you want it to be getting into the blood and start acting very quickly as much as possible. But remember that also has a time delay. It is not that immediately it does act. There is first of all, once you put it into the skin, under the skin, it goes to blood after 10 minutes. And then that process of staying there inside the blood is also 5 minutes about that. So it essentially takes about 15-20 minutes for acting. And then entire process has to be repeated every meal cycle. That means after 2-3 hours, the entire cycle has to be repeated again, or maybe 4-5 hours later once you take a meal. The entire mechanism of doing that demands that you actually rely on only short-acting insulin. Long-acting is not there in the system altogether.
Thank you, sir. The next question is the simulation and the emulation results that you showed during your presentation. Are they carried out on the subjects?
No, the subject we taken the data, so the blood samples and all that we have taken. And this model that we talked about is pretty much standard model all over the world actually. That has been accepted very well. Something started with Burzman was a student of Covelli in Italy, and then together they developed something called Burzman's model now. But having said that, Covelli's group is the one who actually developed this T1DM simulator. So they've got done some, thousands of simulations, thousands of data collection, validation, and things like that. Based on which, whatever they propose, the model is essentially valid. But the parameters of the model is actually diagnosed from our own people. So the interactions and all that, whatever hormones do interact and all that, that is taken from the model. But the coefficients or parameters are actually identified from the test carried out for our own patients only. So as this is actually a beginning new journey sort of thing, our initial version 1 artificial pancreas system will have these requirements that the patient that wants to put an AP from our team will have to go through the diagnosis process initially for 1 day of hospitalization, whatever. We will go through the entire cycle. We'll identify the parameters, then accordingly come back to the MPC, then put all those safety things, verify, and that will take about a day or something to get into the confidence level simulation. Then that will finally go into that. But all those things will slowly get kind of eliminated over the period of time. Remember, this biological research, biomedical research takes time. So what we talk today is probably it requires 5 years to kind of polish go to that level essentially. But I am very sure we'll go there. That is not a problem at all. But as of now, these requirements stands. The whole good basically.
Yeah, very much agree on that, sir. Yeah. So last couple of questions and we would be concluding the session. So the next question is on biosensors used for this project. Is there any work happening in IASC Nano Center? I'm not sure if you can throw any light on that.
The best extent of our knowledge, or my knowledge rather, and this kind of sensing is not happening. The other sensing that Professor Navkant Bhatt has taken a very good initiative. In fact, he is talking about a multi-parameter sense point of care device that has become quite popular. In fact, that also was one of the best 15 projects in print. And they have done large scale testing also. But unfortunately, all those testing cannot be done in real time. What we talk about is a real time sensor, which is supposed to give us the data every 1 minute, preferably, and at the worst case, every 5 minutes. And that kind of things are not there in entire country. Not necessarily in Nano Center, not necessarily in IISc. The entire country, nothing is there. So, in fact, Descom is a very good company. They were talking about every big company is also aiming for sensor selling in India. By the way, a lot of diabetic people, and they can sell a sensor, nothing like that. So they are now talking about little bit degraded performance, but getting these sensors manufactured in India itself, in Pune somewhere. And there is this Jalaram Diabetes Center, which actually helps holds this diabetic conference every year also. He's a very good and kind of entrepreneur. And along with his thing, and then Descom, they were talking about having a sensor company in India. But that is still Descom, it's not Indian company. And of course, this is a very fertile field, and we talked to Domkan some time back. His own interest also to look into this CGM development as well. But I don't think anything really has started in that direction. That is.
Thank you, sir. The last question would be: is there any possibility that the components can be surgically inserted and can be controlled outside?
There are thought process like that, but implanted. See, this entire thing which is getting implanted, that lifespan has to be very very high. If you talk about implanted sensors, that first of all it should not disturb the system. That means to be biologically very compatible, and then it should remain there for a very very long time, at least few years altogether. Otherwise, those kind of sensors are simply not available in this technology. And of course, nobody wants to put an implantable sensor. Every patient is worried about that. We don't know what will happen inside. There are infection issues. There are sometimes it can actually go transmit inside the body also. We don't know depending on the situation there. I mean, there are many other issues for which patients also don't want it implantable sensors all the time. Everybody is happy to have a little bit subcutaneous sensor. If it doesn't feel at all, I put that sensor myself 2-3 times. You just put an applicator, so the spring loaded or something. You just put it and put a spring action sort of thing. You just press it and immediately it goes to the screen. There's nothing like no pain, nothing. You don't even realize that. So while taking out also, you just do 2-3 and just peel it out. Actually, it just comes out easy. Replacing the sensor is very easy. Putting and replacing. And I don't think a biological implantable sensor in this direction is really patients will like it or something. And to the best of my knowledge, it is not there throughout the world as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for sparing your valuable time on a Sunday evening and providing such a insightful sessions. Do you have any last remarks before we conclude this session?
Well, it was just such a pleasure to kind of talk to you. And I really enjoyed this topic.
Thank you very much, sir. And for all the participants, there would be a feedback link which would be sent out to your email IDs. Please do take a time and share the feedback of this session. Yes, we would be sharing the recording of this webinar after a few days on our YouTube Bangalore section channel. So please subscribe and follow our YouTube channel for more such insights on the webinars. So thank you, Dr. Padi, and we would be concluding the session for today. Thank you all.
One second, those of you who are students here, if you really want to continue this journey of join hands, you are welcome to contact us. That's the message from my side.
Thank you, sir. We will share that as well to the participants. Thank you very much. Thank you all. See you tomorrow.